The decorations were perfect, and my best friend looked genuinely happy until my husband squeezed my hand and whispered that we had to go right now. I thought he was being dramatic until he showed me what no one else noticed. That baby shower was not a celebration, it was a trap. The person I trusted most had been using my name like a key. If you have ever ignored a red flag because it wore a friendly face, you will understand why I could not look away. My name is Aspen Rodriguez, and at 34 years old, I have made a lucrative career out of predicting when things are about to go wrong. As a risk and compliance officer for Stonebridge Benefits Group, my entire professional life revolves around spotting the microscopic fractures in a corporate foundation before the whole building comes down. I am paid to notice the details that everyone else ignores. I am the person who reads the terms and conditions. I am the one who asks questions that make people uncomfortable in boardrooms. Yet, as we pulled into the gravel driveway of the North Glass Conservatory that Saturday afternoon, I left my professional instincts in the glove compartment of our SUV. I told myself that I was not entering a crime scene or a hostile negotiation. I was simply going to a baby shower for Tessa Lane, my best friend of 18 years. We live in Haven Ridge, North Carolina, a town that prides itself on manicured lawns and the kind of aggressive politeness that masks 1,000 judgmental thoughts. The North Glass Conservatory was the crown jewel of our local event spaces, a massive structure of steel and glass that cost thousands of dollars to rent for a single afternoon. Sunlight hammered against the panes, turning the interior into a glittering prism. Beside me, my husband Jordan killed the engine. Jordan Hale works in digital security for Vantage Shore, and usually, he is the golden retriever to my Doberman. He is the one who charms the neighbors and remembers birthdays. But as he looked out the windshield at the valet stand and the perfectly arranged floral arches, his smile did not reach his eyes. He was scanning the perimeter like he was on a protection detail, not attending a party for a woman he had known since college. I reached into the back seat to grab the gift I had spent 3 months creating. It was not something off the registry. It was a hand-knit blanket made of soft, organic yellow wool, folded neatly beside a stack of vintage children's books I had hunted down in antique shops across the state. It felt heavy and real in my hands, a testament to a friendship that had survived bad breakups, career changes, and family tragedies. I felt a surge of protective pride. Tessa was finally getting the family she wanted. I was going to be the best aunt I could be. I smoothed down my dress, took a breath, and looked at Jordan. He was still staring at the entrance. When we walked toward the heavy glass doors, the air conditioning hit us like a physical wall, carrying the scent of expensive lilies and vanilla. The space was breathtaking, I had to admit that, but it was breathtaking in the way a magazine spread is. It felt curated to within an inch of its life. There was a dedicated mocktail bar with a mixologist juggling bottles. There was a neon sign against a greenery wall that read, Baby Lane in looping. Modern script, a photographer was already circling, snapping candid photos that looked entirely staged. It was beautiful, but it felt frictionless. It felt like a commercial for happiness, rather than happiness itself. Then we reached the check-in table. I had been to dozens of baby showers in Haven Ridge. Usually, there is a guest book, maybe a polite request to address an envelope for a thank you card. This was different. 2 young women in matching beige headsets stood behind a sleek white counter. They were not friends of Tessa. They were staff. One of them smiled at me with teeth that looked too white to be natural and asked for my name. Aspen Rodriguez, I said. She tapped on a tablet, her long acrylic nails clicking against the screen. Then she handed me a wristband. It was not a paper wristband like you get at a concert. It was a silicone band with a distinct, complex QR code printed on the face. Please wear this at all times, she said, her voice bright and hollow. It is for registry verification and guest perks. You will need to scan it to access the gift lounge and the digital memory book. I frowned. Holding the band, registry verification? For a baby shower? It felt clinical, invasive. I looked at Jordan. He took his wristband without a word. But I saw his eyes narrow. He did not put it on immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and opened the camera app. He hovered it over the code, not to scan it, but to inspect the URL string that popped up on his screen. He stared at it for 3 seconds, his thumb hovering over the screen, and then he went dark. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and the wristband onto his wrist. But his posture had shifted. He had seen something. We walked deeper into the conservatory. The chatter was loud, a wall of laughter and clinking glass. In the center of the room, holding court like a monarch, was Tessa. She looked radiant in a flowing sage-green dress, one hand resting protectively on her bump. When she saw me, her face lit up, but as I moved in to hug her, I felt a strange resistance. It was a hug, but it was a hug for the camera. She squeezed me, then pulled back almost instantly, her eyes already darting over my shoulder to see who else had arrived. "Aspen, you made it," she said, her voice pitched half an octave higher than normal. "Isn't it magical? Look at the light. It is incredible." "Tess," I said, holding up my gift box, "I made this for you. I know it isn't on the list, but I thought—" She cut me off with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Oh, you are so sweet. Just drop it on the table with the others. We are doing a reveal later." She did not ask to see it. She did not ask how I was. She pivoted to wave at a woman across the room. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. We had been best friends for nearly 20 years. We had held each other while we cried over parents we had lost. This woman felt like a stranger wearing Tessa's face. I stepped back, feeling suddenly unmoored, and looked for Dylan, Tessa's husband. Usually, Dylan would be running around getting drinks or making awkward dad jokes. Instead, I spotted him in the far corner, near a cluster of ferns. He was deep in conversation with a man I did not recognize. The stranger was wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and he was not smiling. He looked bored, efficient. Dylan looked sweaty. He was nodding rapidly, wiping his forehead with a cocktail napkin. I felt a hand on my lower back. It was Jordan. He was standing close to me. Too close for casual socializing. He was creating a shield. "Did you see the network name?" he whispered, his voice so low I could barely hear him over the jazz music. "No." I said, "Why?" "It is an open mesh network," he said. "No password. And that QR code on your wrist? It does not just link to a registry. Aspen, it executes a script." I looked at him, trying to process the technical jargon. "Jordan, you are being paranoid. It is just a tech-heavy party. Dylan loves gadgets." Jordan did not answer. He was looking at the man in the corner, the one talking to Dylan. His gaze was locked on the stranger's face. Analyzing. Processing. I saw the muscle in Jordan's jaw feather. He knew who that man was, or at least, he knew what kind of man he was. The music swelled. A waiter walked by with a tray of perfectly circular hors d'oeuvres. Someone laughed near the neon sign. It was the perfect party. It was the picture of suburban success. But standing there, clutching my hand-knit blanket that suddenly felt pathetic and small, I felt the unmistakable sensation of the floor dropping out. I was standing on a stage, and I did not know my lines. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was being judgmental. I told myself to be a good friend and enjoy the mocktails. But then Jordan leaned in again, and this time, he did not whisper about networks or scripts. He simply squeezed my hand, hard enough to hurt, and kept his eyes fixed on the corner of the room where the shadows were just a little too long. I left Jordan by the entrance, or rather, he planted himself there like a sentry while I drifted toward a cluster of familiar faces near the bar. These were girls I had known since our dorm days at UNC, women who knew my coffee order and my deepest insecurities. Usually, seeing them was a relief, a chance to drop the professional mask and just be Aspen. But today, the circle felt tight, anxious. They were holding their mocktails with white knuckles. Sarah, a marketing director who usually commanded every room she entered, looked at me with a furrowed brow. "Aspen, did you get a weird email from the registry this morning?" she asked, keeping her voice low. I paused, holding my untouched drink. No, I said, I brought a physical gift. Why? Sarah exchanged a look with Bex, who was standing next to her. I got a confirmation email at 6 this morning, Sarah whispered. It said thank you for your purchase of the deluxe high chair. But I did not buy the high chair. I have not bought anything yet because I was waiting to see what she actually needed. Me too, Bex chimed in. I got one for a bottle warmer. It had my name, my email, even the last 4 digits of my visa. I thought I might have drunk shopped or something, but I checked my bank app and there is no charge pending. It is just weird. It is probably just a glitch, Sarah said, waving her hand dismissively, though her eyes did not smile. They must be using some beta platform. You know Dylan, he always wants the newest tech toy before it is actually ready for the public. We all laughed, but it was a dry, brittle sound. I excused myself, feeling a sudden need to find the gift table. I wanted to see my yellow blanket sitting there. A tangible piece of reality in a room that was feeling increasingly digital, but when I found the designated area, there was no mountain of pastel-wrapped boxes. There was no tower of diapers. Instead, there was a long, sleek white table manned by another woman in a beige headset. Behind her, 3 tablets were mounted on stands at eye level. My box was nowhere to be seen. Excuse me, I said to the woman. I brought a gift. A box. Where should I put it? She smiled that same blinding, empty smile. Oh, we are taking all physical items to the back for safekeeping and logging. We want to keep the aesthetic clean for the photos, but please, make sure you scan the QR code on the tablet. It unlocks a personalized thank you video from Tessa and Dylan. It is really touching. I looked at the tablet. The screen prompted me to enter my email and phone number to verify my identity before I could view the video. It felt less like a party and more like a checkpoint at a border crossing. I stepped back, murmuring that I would do it later, and moved away. From across the room, I spotted Jordan. He was not looking at me. He had moved near the check-in station, but he was crouching down, pretending to tie his shoe. I knew for a fact his loafers did not have laces. He was staring at the underside of the table where the router was blinking. I followed his gaze and saw it. A small, black rectangular device zip-tied to the main cable. It had a single green light that pulsed in a rhythm that did not match the router. It looked industrial. It looked like something that belonged in a server room, not a conservatory filled with balloons. I turned away, trying to regulate my breathing, and nearly bumped into Dylan. He was standing with his back to me, phone pressed to his ear, his other hand chopping the air aggressively. Look, I do not care about the latency, he hissed into the phone. Just make sure the batch clears by Monday. We need the liquidity before the hold releases. Monday. Do not mess this up. He hung up and spun around, his face flushing red when he saw me. Aspen, he boomed, his voice swinging wildly back to the jovial host persona. So glad you are here. Having a good time? I nodded, forcing a smile. Great time. Dylan, just admiring the setup. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, his grip a little too tight, his palm damp. Yeah, we went all out. Tessa deserves it. Everything for the future. Right? He moved on before I could answer. Diving back into the crowd, I stood there, replaying his words. The batch clears by Monday. In my line of work, we talk about batches when we are processing massive payroll dumps or settling insurance claims. We do not talk about batches at a social gathering unless we are moving money we do not want people to track. I needed to find Tessa. I needed to see my friend and convince myself that I was the crazy one. I found her near the dessert display, talking to Mrs. Higgins, a wealthy philanthropist who sat on 3 different hospital boards in the county. Tessa was holding Mrs. Higgins's hands, her expression earnest and intense. It is not just about a baby shower, Tessa was saying, her voice smooth and practiced. We are launching a community initiative. Bloomnest is going to revolutionize how mothers support each other. It is about building something bigger. We are creating a safety net. And your support would mean the world to the founding circle. It sounded like a pitch. It sounded like she was asking for seed funding. not advice on teething rings. I looked past Tessa to a small placard on the table. It had a QR code and a logo I had missed earlier because it was printed in faint. Metallic gold ink against a white background. Bloom Nest Registry. Underneath, in font so small I had to squint, was a URL that ended in a domain extension I did not recognize. It was not .com or .org, it was .io, a tech startup domain. I felt a vibration in my clutch. I pulled out my phone, expecting a text from work. It was from Jordan. Look at the guy in the corner, Calvin Reddick. I looked up. Jordan was standing by a pillar, his phone in his hand, his eyes hard. I followed his line of sight to the stranger Dylan had been talking to earlier. The man was watching the room with the detached amusement of a zookeeper watching monkeys. I did not know the name Calvin Reddick, but seeing the way Jordan looked at him made my stomach turn over. Jordan did not look at people like that unless they were threats. Suddenly, the music cut out, a microphone feedback squeal pierced the air, and everyone turned toward the center of the room. Dylan was standing on a small riser, holding a mic, beaming. "Okay, everyone, if I could get your attention," he shouted. "We want to thank you all for coming out to celebrate the next chapter of our lives. But mostly, I want to celebrate the woman who makes it all possible, my beautiful wife, Tessa." Applause rippled through the room. It was loud, enthusiastic. Tessa stepped up onto the riser, wiping a tear from her eye. She looked angelic. She looked vulnerable. She started, her voice breaking perfectly. "I look around this room and I see so much love, and I realize that raising a child takes a village. Thank you for being our village. Thank you for believing in us." The room swayed with collective emotion. Women were dabbing their eyes. I felt a lump in my throat despite myself. This was my best friend. She was having a baby. Maybe I was just jealous. Maybe I was cynical. I took a step forward, wanting to clap, wanting to believe. Then I felt a hand on my arm. It was not a gentle touch. It was a grip. Jordan was beside me. He was not looking at Tessa. He was looking at the exit. "We have to go," he said. His voice was not a whisper, but it was quiet, flat, and devoid of any room for argument. "Jordan," I hissed, trying to pull my arm away without making a scene. "What are you doing? She is giving her speech. This is my best friend." He did not let go. He stepped closer, his body blocking me from the view of the man in the corner, blocking me from Dylan, blocking me from the lie. "We are leaving, Aspen," he said, and for the first time in 10 years of marriage, I heard genuine fear in his voice. "Right now, do not look at them. Just walk." I looked at his face. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the assessment of risk. I looked back at Tessa, who was basking in the applause, her hands on her belly, smiling at a room full of people wearing tracking devices on their wrists. Jordan pulled me, and this time, I let him. The illusion did not shatter all at once. It just dissolved, leaving something cold and sharp in its place. We were walking away from the party, but the way Jordan was moving, it felt more like we were running from a blast zone. I approached Tessa near the dessert table, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. She was in the middle of laughing at something Mrs. Higgins had said, her head thrown back, exposing the long, elegant line of her neck. When she saw me, her smile widened, but it did not reach the corners of her eyes. It was a mask, porcelain and perfect. "Tessa, I am so sorry," I said, forcing the words out through a throat that felt like it was closing up. "I just got a priority alert from Stonebridge. There has been a compliance breach on the West Coast accounts. I have to go handle it immediately." For a fraction of a second, less than half a heartbeat, the mask slipped. The light in her eyes simply vanished. It was not disappointment or sadness that I saw there. It was calculation. Her gaze darted to Jordan, who was standing 10 feet away with his back to us, and then back to me. In that split second, she looked like a chess player realizing she had lost a pawn. Then, just as quickly, the warmth flooded back in. "Oh no, Aspen, that is terrible. On a Saturday? You poor thing. Go. Go save the world. We will save you a piece of cake." She leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I smelled her perfume. Expensive, floral, and cloying. I pulled away, mumbled another apology, and walked toward the exit where Jordan was waiting. I did not look back, but I could feel her eyes on my spine. The moment the heavy glass doors of the conservatory closed behind us, cutting off the jazz music and the chatter, I let the anger take over. I marched to the car, my heels crunching violently on the gravel. Jordan unlocked the doors, and I threw myself into the passenger seat, slamming the door hard enough to make the frame rattle. "You are unbelievable," I snapped as he started the engine. The air conditioning blasted cold air into the tense silence. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? You dragged me out of my best friend's baby shower like we were fleeing a fire. She is pregnant. Jordan, she is happy. And you just had to make a scene because you saw a router you did not like?" Jordan did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not even look at me. He pulled the car out of the lot, his hands steady on the wheel at 10 and 2. He drove past the manicured hedges and the stone pillars of the entrance before he finally spoke. "Check your phone," he said. I stared at him, my jaw clenched. "What?" "Check your notifications. Aspen, specifically your banking app." I let out a frustrated huff, digging my phone out of my clutch. "You are so paranoid. I bet you think they are stealing credit card numbers just because—" My voice died in my throat. There, at the top of my lock screen, was a notification from 2 minutes ago. Transaction alert. Pending charge of $1 from BN Registry. Merchant location, Wilmington, Delaware. I stared at the screen, blinking, trying to make the words rearrange themselves into something that made sense. $1. I did not buy anything, I whispered. I did not swipe my card. I did not even take my wallet out of my bag. Jordan glanced over at me, his face grim. "It is a ping. Aspen. It is a verify and hold protocol. That is how they test if the account is active and the data is valid. They run a microcharge, usually under $2 so the fraud algorithms do not flag it immediately. Once it clears, they know the channel is open, but I never gave them my card." I argued. Though my voice was losing its conviction, I just scanned the wristband to see the video. The woman said it was for the guest book. The wristband was the key, Jordan said. Turning onto the main highway, when you scanned that QR code on their tablet, you did not just open a video link, you authorized a third-party integration with whatever digital wallet was active on your phone. Apple Pay, Google Pay, it does not matter. You gave them a tokenized permission. My stomach dropped. I looked at the notification again. $1. It seemed so small, so insignificant, but in my line of work, I knew that the biggest disasters always started with the smallest anomalies. "That is not the worst part," Jordan said. His voice was tight, controlled, the way it got when he was briefing executives on a data breach. I looked up. What could be worse than my best friend stealing from me? "The guy in the corner," Jordan said, the one Dylan was sweating over. "His name is Calvin Reddick." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Jordan said it made the air in the car feel 10 degrees colder. "Who is he?" I asked. "He is a ghost," Jordan replied. 2 years ago. Vantage. Schur was brought in to clean up a mess for a fintech startup in Austin. They had lost $4 million in donation fraud. The architect of the scheme was a guy who built platforms for charity galas and weddings. He would set up these beautiful, legitimate-looking registry sites, collect the data, process the payments, and then funnel the money through shell companies before vanishing. The feds never pinned it on him because he always used a frontman. That guy was Calvin Reddick. I felt a wave of nausea. I thought of Tessa's smile. I thought of the nursery I had helped her paint. I thought of the way she held her belly. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, Tessa does not know him. Maybe Dylan hired him. Maybe Dylan is being scammed too. Tessa is in non-profit work. Jordan, she builds schools. She helps people. She is not a criminal." Jordan merged into the right lane, slowing down as we approached our neighborhood. He looked at me, and for the first time, his expression softened. There was pity in his eyes. "Aspen," he said gently, I am not saying she is the mastermind, but Reddick does not show up at a suburban baby shower unless he has an inside operator, someone who brings the crowd, someone who makes the victims feel safe enough to open their digital wallets. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Hot, angry tears. You are saying she is in on it? That is sick. Jordan, she is having a baby. People can be desperate and dangerous at the same time. Jordan said, "Being a mother does not make you a saint. It just gives you a better reason to need money." He turned into our driveway and killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I looked out the window at our house, at the flower beds I had weeded last weekend, at the life that felt so secure just 3 hours ago. I looked down at my phone. The pending charge was still there. $1, a single. Silent knock on the door of my life, waiting to let the rest of the storm in. I wanted to scream at Jordan. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he was cynical and cruel, but the evidence was right there in my hand, glowing in high definition. I opened the door and stepped out onto the driveway. My legs felt shaky. I felt like I had not just left a party. I felt like I had walked out of a warm, bright room and stepped straight into a crime scene, only to realize that the chalk outline on the floor was drawn around me. Sunday morning broke over Haven Ridge with a deceptive calm. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue, the kind that usually made me want to go for a run or organize the pantry. Instead, I sat at my kitchen island, staring at my phone, the $1 pending charge still glowing on the screen like a radioactive burn. Jordan had gone to the gym, or maybe he just needed space from my denial, but his absence gave me the room to do something stupid. I needed to see Tessa. I needed to prove to myself that my husband was wrong, that the man in the corner was just a coincidence, and that my best friend was not looking at me as a line item on a spreadsheet. I typed out a text, keeping it breezy, the lie tasting like ash on my tongue. "Hey, T." Realized I forgot to tuck the care instructions for the wool blanket in the box. "Mind if I swing by to drop it off?" The response came back in 30 seconds. It was too fast. Usually, Tessa took hours to reply on weekends, claiming pregnancy brain or Dylan's no-phone Sunday rule. "Door is open. Maddie is here helping me sort. Come over." I grabbed my keys and the small card I had actually written the night before. The drive to Tessa's house was short, winding through streets named after trees that had been cut down to build the subdivisions. Her house was a sprawling colonial with black shutters and a wraparound porch, the kind of house that appeared in brochures for the American dream. But when I pulled up, the driveway was empty except for Maddie's beat-up sedan. The balloons from yesterday were gone. The wreath on the door was gone. The house looked stripped, like a stage set after the actors had gone home. Maddie Lane opened the door before I could knock. Tessa's younger sister was 24. Sweet, and usually a little scattered. Today, she looked frayed. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing one of Dylan's oversized t-shirts. "Hey, Aspen," she said, forcing a smile, before she stepped back to let me in. Her eyes darted up to the corner of the porch ceiling. I followed her gaze. A sleek black camera lens stared back at us. It was new. Maddie waited for the red light on the device to blink once before she actually opened the screen door. It was a small movement, a hesitation that most people would miss. But I worked in compliance. I knew what it looked like when someone was afraid of being watched. "Tessa is upstairs lying down," Maddie said, lowering her voice. "Dylan is on a call in the back." I stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of bleach and cardboard, not the lavender candles Tessa usually burned. The living room was piled high with boxes, but they were not the chaotic, happy piles of a family merging gifts. They were stacked with military precision, labeled with black marker. "I will just run up and leave this in the nursery," I said, holding up the card. Maddie hesitated, shifting her weight. "Oh, sure, just be quick. Dylan does not like people wandering around when he is working." I climbed the stairs, the carpet muffling my footsteps. The door to the nursery was ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside, expecting to feel that warm, fuzzy anticipation that comes with baby rooms. Instead, I felt a chill. The room was beautiful, painted a soft, gender-neutral sage. The crib was a mid-century modern piece that cost more than my first car. But as I walked closer, I noticed the details. The mattress was still wrapped in heavy industrial plastic. The changing pad had the manufacturer's cardboard insert still taped to the top. The mobile hanging above the crib still had the zip ties securing the felt animals. I reached out and touched the pile of onesies folded on the changing table. They were stiff. The price tags were still attached, tucked carefully inside the collars. This was not a room waiting for a baby. This was a showroom. It was staged. It looked exactly like the photos Tessa had posted on Instagram, perfect and lifeless. There was no bag of diapers in the corner, no half-empty tube of rash cream, no breast pump manual on the nightstand. It was a set. I turned to leave, my stomach twisting, and saw the door to the adjoining room, Dylan's home office, was wide open. A stack of papers sat on the edge of the mahogany desk, fluttering slightly under the draft from the air vent. I knew I should not look. I knew I should turn around and walk away. But I took 2 steps forward. The top document was an Excel spreadsheet that had been printed out landscape style. The header did not say guest list or baby shower. It read, Q3 activation, North Glass event. My eyes scanned the columns, lead name, data capture status, conversion probability, payout tier. My name was there. Aspen Rodriguez, under data capture status. It said complete, under payout tier. It said high value. Next to the spreadsheet was a stack of thick envelopes. The return address on the top one was a company I did not know, but the stamp was marked Vendor Reimbursement. Aspen? I jumped, spinning around. Maddie was standing in the doorway, her face pale. She was wringing her hands, her eyes wide. I was just looking for the trash can for this wrapper. I stammered, holding up the plastic sleeve of the card. Maddie did not buy it. She looked at the papers on the desk, then back at me. She looked terrified. You should not be in here, she whispered. Dylan said we have to clean the list this week. He said no loose ends. Clean the list? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. What does that mean? Maddie? Clean the list of what? She opened her mouth to answer. Then her eyes snapped to the ceiling corner of the office. Another camera. She shut her mouth audibly, shaking her head. Just go. Aspen, please, if he finds you in here. She did not finish the sentence. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and steered me out of the room. As we passed the landing, I saw a large cardboard box taped shut near the stairs. It was not a gift box. It was a heavy-duty moving box. The shipping label was large and bold. Destination: Haven Ridge. Storage unit, number 112. Why would they be moving baby gifts to a storage unit the day after the shower? You bring gifts into the nursery, not out to a concrete box on the edge of town. I let Maddie lead me downstairs. She practically shoved me toward the front door, her breathing shallow. Tell Tessa I stopped by, I said, trying to catch her eye, trying to find the girl I had known since she was in braces. Maddie did not look at me. She just nodded and reached for the lock. As I stepped onto the porch, the sound of a sliding glass door opening around the side of the house froze me. I stopped, pressing myself against the siding, hidden by a large pillar. It was Dylan. He had walked out onto the patio. I could hear the crunch of his shoes on the stone. She left early. He was saying, his voice low and irritated, yeah, yesterday. No, she did not make a scene, but her husband was watching everything. Good. Keep her off the next invite. We cannot risk a compliance officer sniffing around the payment gateway. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought he might hear it. Keep her off the next invite. Not keep her away from our family. Keep her away from the revenue stream. Just scrub her entry, Dylan continued. And tell Reddick to hold the charge for 48 hours. If she disputes it, we refund and block. I do not want a fraud flag this early in the cycle. I did not wait to hear more. I moved quietly down the steps, keeping the large hydrangeas between me and the side of the house. I got into my car, my hands trembling so badly I had to use both of them to turn the key. As I drove away, the beautiful colonial house shrinking in my rearview mirror. The numbness from the morning evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This was not a misunderstanding. It was not a mistake. My best friend and her husband were running an operation, and I was not a guest. I was a target. And the worst part was not the money. It was the realization that while I was knitting a blanket and dreaming of holding her baby, Tessa was sitting across from me, calculating exactly how much my loyalty was worth on the open market. Monday morning at Stonebridge Benefits Group usually began with the comforting hum of the server room and the smell of industrial coffee. It was a safe space, a world of binary choices where risks were calculated to the fourth decimal point and compliance was a black and white line. But as I sat at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet of quarterly projections, the safety I had spent a decade building felt like it was made of paper. My desk phone rang at 10:17 in the morning. It was not an internal extension. "This is the Fraud Prevention Department calling for Aspen Rodriguez." A woman's voice said, it was professional, crisp, and utterly terrifying. "We received a request to increase the cash advance limit on your primary credit line to $15,000. We just wanted to verbally verify this before processing. As it is a significant jump from your usual activity." I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. "No," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "I did not request that. I am at work. I have not logged into my banking portal in 3 days." There was a pause, the sound of typing on the other end. "Okay, Mrs. Rodriguez, we see the request came through a verified mobile device associated with your profile at 9:30 this morning. Are you sure no one else has access to your unlocked phone?" I looked at my cell phone sitting innocently on my desk. It had been with me all morning. "No," I said. "Deny the request. Freeze the card." I hung up, my hands trembling. A cash advance. Someone was not just trying to buy a stroller. They were trying to liquidate my credit line. I opened my personal email on my phone, my thumb hovering over the icon. At the top of my inbox, time-stamped just before the bank called, was an email with the subject line, "Welcome to your Bloom Nest journey." I clicked it. It was a cheerful, pastel-colored confirmation. "Hi, Aspen. Your registry profile is live. You are all set to receive contributions for the Community Mom Fund. Click here to manage your payouts." I had not created a registry. I was not a mom. I was the victim. I called Jordan immediately. He answered on the first ring, as if he had been waiting. They created an account in my name. I whispered, keeping my voice low so my cubicle neighbor would not hear. "Bloom Nest, and the bank just called about a cash advance." "Jordan, how are they doing this? I have two-factor authentication on everything." Jordan's voice was calm, but it was the kind of calm that comes before a storm. "Send me the email headers. Aspen, right now." I forwarded the email. A minute later, he called back. "It is not a hack," he said. "It is a clone. When you scanned that QR code at the party to see the video, you authorized a session token. But looking at this header, they also used your phone number for verification. Did you get a text code on Saturday?" I racked my brain. "No." I said, "Wait, when we were at the check-in table, the girl with the tablet asked for my number to text me the link in case the scan failed. I gave it to her. And she probably typed in the verification code herself while you were standing there smiling at her." Jordan said, "It is a man-in-the-middle attack, but executed with a smile and a balloon arch. They used your physical presence to bypass the security check." I felt sick. I remembered the girl's bright smile, the way Tessa had hugged me. It was all a performance. The baby shower was not a party. It was a data harvesting operation. I hung up and sat back in my chair, the office noise fading into a dull roar. I needed to think. I needed to stop reacting and start investigating. I opened my calendar and started scrolling back, looking for every interaction I had with Tessa over the last 6 months. The pattern emerged with sickening clarity. 3 months ago, Tessa had asked me to join the planning committee for the shower. "I just need someone organized," she had said. "Someone people trust." She had put my name on the invitations as a co-host. At the time, I thought it was an honor. Now I realized it was a credibility loan. She needed my name on the invite list so that when the requests for money started coming, people would see Aspen Rodriguez and assume it was legitimate. 2 months ago, she had sent me a vendor contract for the venue. "Can you just look this over?" she had asked. "You are so good at compliance." I had read it, made notes, and sent it back. I had essentially provided free legal consulting for the infrastructure of my own robbery. And then there was the text from last week. "Can you bring your checkbook just in case the caterer needs a deposit on site? Dylan is having issues with his transfer limits." I had laughed it off then. I was not laughing now. I went home early. I could not focus on risk assessments for strangers when my own life was hemorrhaging. When I walked through the door, Jordan was sitting at the dining table. He had his laptop open and 2 other monitors set up. He looked tired. "I have to tell you something," he said without preamble. I sat down opposite him, dropping my bag on the floor. "What?" "I saw this coming," he said quietly. "Not the registry scam specifically, but the desperation. 2 months ago, I saw Dylan at a tech mixer in Raleigh. He was pitching investors on a platform called Bloomnest. But he was manic. He was promising returns that were mathematically impossible. I looked into his liquidity then. They are broke. Aspen. They are underwater on the house, the cars, everything. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, the betrayal stinging almost as much as the theft. "Because you would have bailed them out," he said, looking me in the eye. "You would have written them a check for $10,000 to save the house, and they would have burned through it in a week. I wanted to protect you from their mess. I did not realize they would decide to just steal from you instead. I wanted to be angry at him, but I knew he was right. I would have helped. I would have been the good friend, and that kindness was exactly what they were banking on." "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "No more protecting, no more denial. We are going to bury them." I pulled out my laptop and started building the file. I downloaded every email, every text message, every calendar invite. I found the photo I had taken of the check-in board, zooming in until the pixelated logo of Bloomnest was visible. I printed the bank alert about the cash advance. I printed the $1 test charge receipt. This was not gossip. This was evidence. Jordan slid a piece of paper across the table. It had a name and a number on it. Detective Miller, Fox Ridge County Financial Crimes Unit. "I went to college with him." Jordan said, "He is good. He knows about Reddick, and he has been trying to find a way to pin something on Dylan Cross for 6 months. He just needed a victim willing to go on record." I looked at the number, calling the police on my best friend. It felt like crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. If I made this call, there was no going back. There would be no apology brunch, no crying it out. This was war. I picked up my phone to dial. But before I could, a notification banner dropped down from the top of the screen. "Bank alert. Your debit card ending in 4098 has been placed on temporary hold due to suspicious activity at an ATM in Charlotte." Charlotte was 2 hours away. I was sitting in my dining room. "They are not waiting," Jordan said, reading the alert over my shoulder. "They are trying to cash out before the system locks them down. They know you suspect something." I stared at the phone. My hand stopped shaking. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was done being the friend. I was done being the victim. I was the risk and compliance officer, and I had just identified a critical failure in the system. I dialed the number on the paper. "Detective Miller," I said when the voice on the other end answered. "My name is Aspen Rodriguez. I have a file regarding a wire fraud and identity theft ring operating out of the North Glass Conservatory, and I know exactly who is running it." I hung up the phone and looked at Jordan. "Let's go to work," I said. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across our lawn, but inside the house, the lights were bright. We were not going to sleep tonight. We had a case to build. And for the first time in 2 days, I did not feel afraid. I felt dangerous. The text message arrived at 6:45 in the morning, vibrating against the nightstand like a physical threat. It was short, devoid of emojis, and completely out of character for the woman who usually communicated in paragraphs of exclamation points. "Meet me alone. The Boathouse Cafe. You have misunderstood everything. Please." I stared at the screen. My instinct, the professional paranoia that Jordan and I had been nurturing for 48 hours, told me not to go. It told me to forward the screenshot to Detective Miller and stay inside my locked house. But another part of me, the part that had shared a dorm room with Tessa Lane and held her hair back when she had the flu, needed to look her in the eye one last time. I needed to see if there was anything left of my best friend behind the algorithm of theft she had helped build. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. It was a small, weather-beaten place on the edge of Lake Haven, mostly empty on a Monday morning. The water was gray and choppy, matching the knot in my stomach. I ordered a black coffee and sat in the back booth, watching the door. Tessa walked in at 9 o'clock exactly, even now, with her world presumably collapsing. She was impeccable. She wore a cream-colored maternity dress that draped perfectly over her bump, and her hair was blown out in soft, shiny waves. She looked like she was heading to a photo shoot, but as she got closer, the illusion cracked. Her foundation was a shade too heavy, trying to cover the dark circles under her eyes. Her hands, usually manicured and still, were trembling as she clutched her designer bag. She sat down opposite me without ordering anything. She did not try to hug me. She just looked at me with wide, watery eyes. "Aspen," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Thank God you came. Dylan is going crazy. He thinks you are going to the police." I looked at her, keeping my face completely still. "I am going to the police, Tessa. They already have the file." Tessa flinched as if I had slapped her. No, you cannot. You do not understand. It is not what it looks like. We are not stealing. It is a bridge loan, a liquidity strategy." I laughed, a harsh, dry sound that made the barista look up from the espresso machine. A liquidity strategy? Is that what we are calling identity theft now? Is that what we call opening a cash advance on your best friend's credit line without her consent? Tessa reached across the table. Trying to take my hand, I pulled back. "It was an automated error," she pleaded. "The system, Bloomnest, it is in beta. It aggressively optimizes for donor potential. We did not mean for it to trigger a cash advance. We were going to refund it. Aspen, I swear." I leaned forward, lowering my voice to a lethal whisper. "Stop lying. Tessa, I know about Calvin Reddick." The name hit her like a physical blow. She blinked rapidly. Once, twice, 3 times. It was a nervous tic she had had since college, one she only displayed when she was cornered. "I do not know who that is," she said. But her eyes shifted to the left, toward the window. "Don't insult my intelligence," I said. "He was at the shower. He is the architect, and you are the face. You are the bait. Tessa, you and that baby." Tessa crumbled. The poise evaporated, replaced by a raw, messy desperation. She put her head in her hands and started to cry. But it was not the pretty, silent crying she did in movies. It was ugly, gasping sobs. "You do not know what it is like," she choked out. "Dylan leveraged everything. The house, the cars. We are drowning. Aspen, he said this was the only way to save our credit rating. He said it was just a platform for community support. I just wanted to give my baby a home. I just wanted to be safe. For a second, I felt the old instinct kick in. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to tell her we could fix it. She looked so small, so terrified. She was a mother trying to protect her child from financial ruin. It was a story I wanted to believe because the alternative was too painful to process. But then I remembered the spreadsheet on Dylan's desk. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "If you are just a victim, Tessa, if you are just doing what Dylan tells you because you are scared, then answer me one thing." She looked up, mascara running down her cheeks, nodding eagerly. "Anything. Ask me anything. Why was my name on the next list?" I asked. The sobbing stopped instantly. The air between us went dead silent. I saw the file. "Tessa," I continued, my voice flat. Q3. Activation. My name was not just on the guest list, it was on the lead list for the next event. If this was a mistake, if you were just trying to survive, why were you planning to sell me out again? Tessa froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, not because she was innocent, but because she had not prepared a script for this specific question. "It is not like that," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room. "We just needed to bridge the gap until Monday." "Until Monday," I repeated. "Why Monday? What happens on Monday? Tessa?" She bit her lip, hard enough to leave a white mark. She looked at her phone, which was face down on the table. "The batch," she whispered, almost to herself. "The donation batch clears on Monday. And then?" I pressed. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the real Tessa, not the victim, not the best friend. I saw the partner. "We have a matching gift pending," she said, her voice gaining a sudden, feverish intensity, "a corporate sponsor, a wealthy angel investor who promised to match every dollar raised over the weekend by 300%. If the batch clears tomorrow morning, if the fraud flags do not trigger, the matching funds hit the account at noon." She leaned in, her eyes shining with a terrifying hope. "It is $500,000. Aspen. Once that hits, we pay everyone back. We refund the credit cards. We refund you. And then we disappear. We move to Costa Rica. We start over. No debt. No Dylan screaming about payments. Just us and the baby." I stared at her, feeling the blood drain from my face. She actually believed it. She believed that if they just stole enough money, they could buy their innocence back. "Disappear?" I asked. "You mean run? You mean take the money and run before the chargebacks hit?" "It is not running if we pay the principal back," she hissed. "It is just exiting the market." I stood up. I could not sit there anymore. The smell of the coffee was making me nauseous. "This is not fundraising. Tessa," I said, looking down at her. "This is not a mistake. It is a trap. And you are not the bait anymore. You are the hunter." "No," she cried, reaching for my wrist again, missing by an inch. "You do not understand. It started as marketing. We were just going to use the data to target ads. But then the money, it was so easy. Aspen, people just give it to you if you smile and tell them you are building a community." I looked at her hand, hovering in the air where my arm had been. I looked at her face, twisted in panic and greed. "You sold me for a matching gift," I said quietly. "You sold 18 years of friendship for a 300% return." "I did not sell you," she screamed, not caring that the barista was now staring openly. "I was going to cut you in. I was going to send you a share once we got settled." That was the final blow. She thought my anger was about the money. She thought I was upset because I had not received my cut of the con. She did not understand loyalty. She did not understand trust. She only understood the ledger. I picked up my purse. "Goodbye, Tessa," I said. "Aspen." "Wait," she yelled, scrambling to slide out of the booth. "You cannot leave. If you flag the account before tomorrow, the match will not fund. You will ruin us. You will send the father of my child to prison." I did not stop. I walked to the door, the bell chiming cheerfully as I pushed it open. I walked out into the gray morning air, leaving her standing there in her beautiful dress, screaming about return on investment. I walked to my car, and for the first time in 2 days, I did not check my bank account. I did not need to. I knew exactly what I had lost. I had not lost $15,000. I had lost the witness to my life. And as I turned the key in the ignition, I realized that the grieving process for a friendship was remarkably similar to the preparation for a trial. You just had to separate the memories from the evidence. The call from the Fox Ridge Financial Crimes Unit came at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. Detective Miller did not waste time with pleasantries. He told me that they had secured a warrant for the storage facility based on the evidence Jordan and I had compiled, specifically the cross-referenced merchant ID and the physical address on the shipping label I had seen at Tessa's house. He asked if I could come down to identify some recovered property. He said it was procedural, but his tone suggested it was personal. I drove to the facility on the outskirts of town, a place where the air smelled of diesel and wet cardboard. The metal roll-up door to Unit 112 was already open when I arrived. 2 uniformed officers were cataloging boxes, and Miller was standing by a folding table, wearing blue latex gloves. When I stepped inside, the breath left my lungs. It was not a storage unit, it was a distribution center. Stacked floor to ceiling were boxes of baby gear, high-end strollers, unopened cribs, boxes of diapers that had been taped shut for shipping. But it wasn't just baby things. There were piles of wedding gifts, engagement sets, and charity gala auction items. Everything had a tag. Everything was pristine. And right in the center, sitting on top of a crate marked "Return to Vendor," was the yellow wool blanket I had knitted. It had a sticky note on it that read, "Handmade, no SKU. Donate to Goodwill or discard." I felt a flash of heat behind my eyes, but I swallowed it down. Miller waved me over to the table. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need you to look at this," he said, sliding a thick manila folder toward me. "We found this in a filing cabinet in the back. It is labeled Corporate Governance." I opened the folder. The first document was a set of bylaws for a nonprofit organization called the Bloom Nest Foundation. I flipped to the signature page. There, in black ink, was my name, Aspen Rodriguez, board treasurer, and next to it was my signature. It was a good forgery. It had the same loop on the R that I used, but I had never signed this document. I had never even seen it. "This dates back 6 months," Miller said, watching my face. "According to these papers, you are the chief financial officer of this operation. You are legally responsible for the allocation of funds. If we had not found this unit, and if this scheme had imploded on its own, the trail would have led straight to your front door." My hands shook as I turned the page. There were more names, other friends. Sarah was listed as director of outreach. Bex was secretary. Tessa had turned her entire social circle into a liability shield. She had not just stolen from us, she had framed us. I left the unit with a copy of the police report and a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I drove straight to Jordan's home office. He was sitting at his computer, headphones around his neck, looking grim. I found something too. He said as I walked in, the police subpoenaed the cloud account linked to the Bloom Nest domain. They sent over the audio files from their pitch meetings. "You need to hear this." He clicked play. The voice that filled the room was crisp, confident, and undeniably Tessa. It was not the voice of a stressed-out mother-to-be. It was the voice of a saleswoman closing a deal. "The key to the conversion rate is intimacy," Tessa's voice said. "We do not use stock photos. We use real-life friendship stories. People donate when they feel close to the cause. If I tell them my best friend Aspen is knitting a blanket, they feel connected. They open their wallets. We monetize the emotional arc." I stared at the speakers. There was no hesitation in her voice, no Dylan in the background telling her what to say. She was not a puppet. She was the playwright. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was selling our history for a conversion rate. I pulled out my phone. I was done with silence. I texted her. I saw the storage unit. "Tessa, I saw the treasurer papers with my forged signature. It is over." I expected silence. I expected a call begging for mercy. Instead, 3 dots appeared immediately. "What do you actually have? Do you have the originals or just copies?" I stared at the screen. No apology, no denial, just a risk assessment. She was trying to figure out if she could destroy the evidence before the indictment came down. She was not my friend. She was a hostile entity attempting damage control. Before I could type a response, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID said, "Maddie Lane." I answered, putting it on speaker. "Maddie?" I asked. "Aspen, I am so sorry," Maddie whispered. Her voice sounded thick, like she had been crying for hours. "I wanted to tell you yesterday. I really did. But Dylan said he would kick me out of the apartment if I said anything. Maddie, tell me the truth." I said, my voice steady. "Is this the first time?" There was a long silence on the other end. "No," she whispered. "They did it in Austin 2 years ago. A wedding registry. And before that, a GoFundMe for a house fire that never happened. They just keep moving. Aspen. They burned the bridges and moved to a new town. But this time the money was bigger. The matching gift they got greedy." I thanked her and hung up. My head was spinning. Austin. A house fire. It was a career. Then came the final blow. My work email pinged on my laptop. It was 7 o'clock at night. Emails at this hour were never good. Subject: Urgent personnel inquiry. Confidential. It was from the Chief Ethics Officer at Stonebridge, Ms. Rodriguez. "We have received an anonymous whistleblower report accompanied by documentation alleging that you are the acting treasurer for an unregistered charity currently under investigation for wire fraud. The report claims you have been using company resources to facilitate these transactions. Effective immediately. Your access to the Stonebridge internal network is suspended pending a formal review. Please report to HR tomorrow morning at 9. I read the email twice. The room seemed to tilt. They had nuked me. Tessa and Dylan knew I was getting close. They knew I had found the storage unit, so they launched a preemptive strike. They sent the forged documents to my boss. They were trying to discredit me, to paint me as the mastermind so that anything I said to the police would look like I was trying to cut a plea deal. Jordan stood up, reading the screen over my shoulder. His hand gripped the back of my chair so hard the leather creaked. "They are trying to kill your credibility," he said, his voice low and dangerous. I closed the laptop. The fear that had been gnawing at me for 3 days suddenly vanished. It was replaced by something much colder and much more useful: clarity. They thought this was a game of he said, she said. They thought they could use my name, my reputation, and my career as collateral damage to cover their exit. They thought that because I was the nice friend, the one who knit blankets and remembered birthdays, I would roll over and die. But they forgot what I did for a living. I did not just knit blankets. I hunted risk. I analyzed threats. And I knew how to dismantle a system from the inside out. "I am not going to HR to defend myself," I said, standing up. Jordan looked at me. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to help them," I said, a smile touching my lips that did not reach my eyes. "Help them?" "I am going to text Tessa back. I am going to tell her I'm scared. I am going to tell her the police are asking questions, and I need her help to fix the paperwork. I am going to play the role she wrote for me. The panicked, loyal best friend." Jordan's eyes narrowed, understanding dawning on his face. "You are going to lure them out. They need the matching gift to clear on Monday to pay off their debts." I said, "And they need a scapegoat. I am going to give them both. But I am going to make sure that when they reach for the money, the handcuffs are already waiting." I picked up my phone and typed a new message to Tessa. "Tessa, please. My boss just emailed me. They are going to fire me. I don't know what to do. The police showed me the papers, but I didn't tell them anything yet. I just want this to go away. Can we fix this?" I hit send. The response came in 10 seconds. "Calm down. We can fix it. But we need to meet. We need to get our story straight before you talk to HR. Tomorrow." I looked at Jordan. The trap was set. They thought they were reeling me in. They had no idea that I was the one holding the line. "We are not just going to clear my name." I told Jordan, "We are going to make sure everyone in Haven Ridge sees exactly who they are." I looked at the yellow blanket in the photo from the storage unit one last time. It looked sad and discarded on the pile of stolen goods. I decided right then that I was not getting that blanket back, but I was absolutely going to get my reputation back, and I was going to take it out of their hide. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, staring at my phone screen. The cursor blinked at the end of the message I had drafted 3 times. This was the most dangerous text I would ever send. It had to tread the razor-thin line between believable gullibility and supportive desperation. If I pushed too hard, Tessa would spook. If I did not push hard enough, she would cut me loose to save herself. I took a breath and hit send. "Tessa, I have been thinking all night. I know Dylan can be intense about finances. If he is forcing you to do this because of the debt, then we need to fix the money problem so you can get out safely. I do not want you to go to jail for his mistakes. Let me help you fix the liquidity issue. I put the phone down and waited. My heart was not racing anymore. It had settled into a slow, heavy rhythm, like a war drum. 3 minutes later, the bubbles appeared. I knew you would understand. Tessa wrote, "He is just so stressed. Aspen, we just need to clear the negative balance. Once we are in the black, we can close the accounts and delete the data. But we need one big push to trigger the matching gift." I had her. She was pivoting back to the victim narrative because it was the only card she had left to play. She needed me to be the savior so she could be the martyr. I typed back immediately. "Okay, let's do a post-shower diaper drive brunch. High net worth guests only. I will host it. I will vouch for it. We tell them it is an exclusive final round for the Community Mom Fund. Before the fiscal quarter closes, I can get Mrs. Higgins and the bored wives to come." The response was almost instantaneous. "You would do that? Aspen, you are saving my life. Dylan says if you host, the trust score goes to 99%. We can clear the batch." I smiled, but there was no joy in it. Of course Dylan agreed. He needed a clean face to put on his dirty operation. He thought he had bullied me into submission with that email to my boss. He thought I was scrambling to prove my loyalty. I drove straight to the precinct. Detective Miller was waiting in a small conference room that smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. I laid my phone on the table. She agreed. I said, "Sunday morning, 10 o'clock. I am renting the private room at the Willow Creek Country Club." Miller nodded, looking at the transcript of the texts. "You understand what we are doing here. Mrs. Rodriguez? We are not preventing the crime. We are facilitating a controlled environment for it to occur. We need them to execute a transaction on a device we are monitoring, with intent to defraud, in real time. I understand." I said, "You need the money to move." Miller leaned forward. "We need to track the merchant ID. We have seen the test charges, but we need to see where the bulk deposit goes. If it hits a shell account in the Caymans, we have federal jurisdiction. If it hits a local account, we have them for wire fraud and larceny. But we need them to feel safe enough to use the primary gateway. That is where Jordan comes in." I said. Jordan had spent the last 24 hours building a digital cage. He called it a transparent proxy. When we set up the event at the country club, he would configure the Wi-Fi. Every guest would connect to what looked like the club's secure network. But every packet of data, every login, every credit card swipe, every QR scan would pass through a server sitting in the back of a van in the parking lot. "We are not hacking them," Jordan had explained to me, his eyes dark with lack of sleep. "We are just recording the traffic on a network we own. It is a wiretap. But for data, and since the police have a warrant, it is admissible." The hardest part was the guest list. I had to invite the very people Tessa and Dylan had targeted. The people whose trust I had unwittingly weaponized. I called Sarah first. We met in her office. With the door closed, I told her everything. I showed her the forgery of my signature. I showed her the spreadsheet with her name listed under conversion probability. Sarah sat in silence for a long time, staring at the wall. Then she looked at me, and her expression was terrifying. "So," she said, her voice deadly calm, "you want me to come to a brunch, eat quiche, and smile at the woman who tried to steal my identity, while the police watch?" "Yes," I said. "I need you to scan the QR code. I need you to input your card details. But use this card." I handed her a prepaid debit card Detective Miller had provided. It was loaded with $50 of department funds, tracked and tagged. When the system asks for a donation, I said, "Enter the maximum amount. The transaction will fail because of the limit. But the attempt is what they need to prosecute." Sarah took the card. "I will be there," she said. "And I'm going to wear my best dress. I want her to look at me when the handcuffs go on." I spent the next 2 days meticulously constructing the stage for Tessa's downfall. I rented the room at the club, paying the deposit with my own card to keep the paper trail clean. I ordered the flowers, white lilies, Tessa's favorite. I sent out the digital invitations. using the Bloom Nest template Tessa provided. But I embedded a tracking pixel in the email body that reported back to Jordan's server. Tessa was spiraling. Her texts became a manic stream of consciousness. One minute she was sending me photos of baby shoes with captions like, "Can't wait for you to meet him." And the next she was asking about the RSVP count and the estimated total of the donations. "Make sure Mrs. Higgins brings her platinum card." She texted on Saturday night. She promised a legacy gift. That alone could clear the debt. "I am on it," I replied. "Don't worry. It will be perfect." She was oscillating between the character she played, the sweet, overwhelmed mother, and the reality of her situation, a cornered grifter needing a payout. She needed an audience to validate her delusion, and she needed cash to validate her survival. I was giving her both. On Saturday night, I sat at my vanity table and removed my makeup. I looked at my reflection. My eyes looked older than they had a week ago. There were lines of tension around my mouth that had not been there before. I picked up the whistleblower email from my boss, which I had printed out. I had already drafted my response, attaching the police report number, the affidavit from Detective Miller, and a timeline of the forgery. I would hit send on Monday morning, the moment the arrest was made. I was not just going to clear my name, I was going to nuke the site from orbit. Jordan walked in and stood behind me. He put his hands on my shoulders. "The van is set," he said quietly. "Miller has 2 plainclothes officers posing as waitstaff." I nodded, watching our reflection. We looked like a power couple, but not the kind that hosted dinner parties. We looked like people who had just buried a body and were discussing the shovel. "Do you think she knows?" Jordan asked. "No," I said. "She is too arrogant. She thinks she manipulated me back into her corner. She thinks friendship is a weakness she can exploit. She does not realize that I'm not acting as her friend anymore. I am acting as a compliance officer closing a loop." I turned off the light. Revenge. I realized as I lay in the dark, was not about screaming. It was not about keying cars or making scenes in restaurants. Real revenge was quiet. It was structural. It was taking the very trap they had built for you and adjusting the springs so that when they stepped on it, it didn't just catch their leg, it broke their entire world. Tomorrow, I would smile. I would hug her. I would hand her a microphone and let her tell her story one last time. And then, I would watch the truth turn the lights on. The Willow Creek Country Club private dining room smelled of fresh lilies and impending disaster. I had chosen the decor myself. Crisp white linens, simple crystal vases, and enough sunlight streaming through the French doors to illuminate every lie in the room. It was minimalist, expensive, and designed to make people feel safe parting with their money. Tessa arrived 20 minutes late, which was perfect. She swept in wearing a soft lavender wrap dress that highlighted her bump, her hair pulled back in a loose, romantic chignon. She looked like the Madonna of the suburbs. The guests, about 30 women, hand-picked from the high-value list Dylan had stolen, actually applauded when she entered. I stood by the entrance, my hands clasped in front of me to hide the fact that they were shaking. I was smiling so hard my cheeks ached. "You look beautiful." "Tess," I said, kissing the air beside her cheek. She gripped my forearm, her nails digging into my skin. "Is Mrs. Higgins here?" she whispered, her voice tight. "She is parking now." I whispered back, "Relax. It is all set up." Dylan was not relaxing. He was pacing near the Mimosa bar, wearing a suit that looked like he had slept in it. He was constantly checking his phone, tapping the screen with a manic rhythm. I knew what he was looking at. He was watching the Merchant Gateway, waiting for the batch to clear. He was watching a pot that was about to boil over and scald him alive. On every table, sitting innocently next to the silverware, was a small card printed on heavy cardstock, scanned to support the Bloom Nest Community Mom Fund. The QR code was the same one from the shower, but the destination had changed. Thanks to Jordan and the warrant, that code was now routing every single packet of data through a localized server sitting in a nondescript van in the parking lot. We were not just watching them steal, we were recording the digital fingerprints of the crime in high definition. I circulated the room, pouring sparkling water, laughing at jokes I did not hear. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I saw Sarah sitting at table 4. Clutching her purse, she caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. She was ready. Then Mrs. Higgins walked in. The room shifted. Mrs. Higgins was old money, the kind of woman whose donation could legitimize a charity for a decade. Dylan stopped pacing. He straightened his tie and practically lunged across the room to greet her. "Mrs. Higgins," he boomed, his voice oozing charm. "We are so honored, truly." I watched him guide her to the best seat in the house. I watched Tessa sit next to her, placing a hand on her arm, leaning in to establish that intimacy she had bragged about in the audio recordings. It was time. I clinked a spoon against my glass. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," I said, my voice steady. "We are here because we believe in community. We believe in supporting mothers, and today, we have a chance to do something transformative." I looked at Tessa. She stood up, taking the cue perfectly. She walked to the front of the room, looking vulnerable and brave. "When I started Bloom Nest," she began, her voice trembling just the right amount, "I did not want to build a platform. I wanted to build a family. I wanted a place where no mom feels alone. But we have hit a critical moment. We have a matching donor who believes in us, but we need to show them that this community is real." She paused for effect, looking around the room with wet, shining eyes. "Every dollar you give today becomes $3. Every diaper becomes a case, but we have to hit our goal by noon." It was a masterclass in manipulation. I saw women reaching for their purses. I saw phones coming out. Mrs. Higgins pulled out a black credit card. Dylan was practically vibrating. He stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Let me help you with that." "Mrs. Higgins," he said, reaching for the card. "The system is a little finicky with the high-limit cards." That was the trigger. The side door to the kitchen swung open. It was not a waiter. It was Detective Miller, followed by 3 other officers in plain clothes. They did not have guns drawn, but the way they moved, swift, silent, and coordinated, sucked the air out of the room. "Dylan Cross," Miller said, his voice cutting through the soft jazz music like a knife. "Step away from the donor." Dylan froze. His hand was inches from Mrs. Higgins' card. He looked at Miller, then at the door, then at me. "What is this?" Dylan stammered, forcing a laugh that sounded like a bark. "Aspen, what is going on? Is this part of the surprise?" I did not smile. I did not flinch. I walked forward until I was standing between him and the exit. "It is not a surprise. Dylan," I said, "it is an audit." He turned pale. "Look, officer, this is a misunderstanding. We are a registered startup. My co-founder here," he pointed a shaking finger at me, "she organized this event. She manages the accounts. If there is an irregularity, talk to her." He was doing exactly what I knew he would do. He was throwing me under the bus to buy himself 3 seconds of air. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and hit a button. The large monitor mounted on the wall, which was supposed to show a slideshow of baby photos, flickered. Instead, a spreadsheet appeared. It was the ledger from his laptop, the one with the column labeled conversion probability, the one with Mrs. Higgins' name next to a figure of $50,000, and right next to it, the routing number for an offshore shell account in the Cayman Islands. "Show the ledger." "Dylan," I said, my voice ringing in the silence. "Right now." The room gasped. Mrs. Higgins snatched her card back as if the table were on fire. Dylan looked at the screen, then at me. His face twisted into something ugly, something primal. He lunged toward the French doors, shoving a chair out of his way. He did not make it 3 steps. 2 officers intercepted him. Grabbing his arms, he struggled, shouting, kicking out, his expensive suit bunching up as they pinned him against the wall. "You set me up!" he screamed, saliva flying from his mouth. "Aspen, you bitch! You set me up!" I did not look at him. I looked at Tessa. She was standing in the middle of the room, frozen. Her hands were still resting on her belly. She looked at Dylan, struggling in the grip of the police. And then she turned her head slowly to look at me. Her eyes were wide, black holes of shock. "Aspen?" she whispered. I said nothing. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice rising to a shriek. "What did you do? We were going to pay it back. We were going to fix it. You were going to run." "Tessa," I said quietly. She took a step toward me, her face contorted with rage. "You ruined everything. You are jealous. You have always been jealous." Then she stopped. A look of absolute terror crossed her face. She grabbed her stomach, doubling over with a sharp, guttural cry. My heart stopped. For a second, the anger vanished. I took a step forward, my instinct to protect her overriding everything else. "Tessa?" I said. "My stomach!" she screamed, collapsing onto her knees. "It hurts. Oh God, it hurts. Someone call 911. Mrs. Higgins yelled. Detective Miller was already on his radio. "We have a medical emergency. Suspect is pregnant. Get the paramedics in here. Now." I dropped to my knees beside her. I did not touch her, but I hovered close. "Tessa, breathe," I said. "Just breathe." She looked up at me, sweat beading instantly on her forehead. She grabbed my wrist, her grip like iron. "You did this," she hissed through her teeth. "You are killing us. Are you happy now?" I looked down at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw the deflection. Even now, in pain, she could not take responsibility. She had to make it my fault. "I am not killing you, Tessa," I said, gently prying her fingers off my wrist. "I am stopping you." The paramedics burst through the doors. They swarmed around her, checking vitals, asking questions. I stood up and backed away, giving them space. "It is stress-induced," one medic shouted. "Her pressure is through the roof. We need to transport her. Monitor the fetal heart rate." They loaded her onto a gurney. She was sobbing now, a high, thin sound that tore at my insides. As they wheeled her out, she did not look at me again. She squeezed her eyes shut, turning her face away from the crowd of women she had tried to rob. Across the room, the officers were marching Dylan out to the other door. He was not looking at his wife. He was looking at the floor, defeated. I stood alone in the center of the room. The brunch was over. The lilies were still perfect. The sunlight was still streaming in. But the silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. I watched the ambulance lights flash through the window, painting the manicured lawn in bursts of red and white. I watched the squad car pull away with Dylan in the back. They were gone, my best friend, her husband, the future I thought we would share. Mrs. Higgins walked up to me. She looked shaken, clutching her purse to her chest. "Aspen," she said softly, Will the baby be okay?" I looked at the flashing lights fading into the distance. "The baby will be safe now," I said. And I meant it. The baby would be safe from the lies. The baby would be born into the truth, however harsh it was. I walked over to the table where Tessa had been sitting. I picked up the small card with the QR code and ripped it in half. The price of justice was high. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean. But as I looked around the room at the faces of the women who still had their savings, who still had their security, I knew I had paid the only price that mattered. I had paid with my history to protect their future. The weeks following the brunch at the Willow Creek Country Club were not filled with the triumphant montages you see in movies. There was no slow-motion walk out of the police station, no popping of champagne corks. Instead, there were hours of deposition in windowless rooms that smelled of stale coffee and copier toner. As the investigation peeled back the layers of Bloom Nest, the scope of the betrayal expanded until it swallowed the entire horizon. Detective Miller discovered that the registry was never just about stealing baby shower gifts. It was a sophisticated laundering operation. Tessa and Dylan had been setting up events to harvest high-net-worth credit card data, run the cards for small donations to establish legitimacy, and then use the returns on unpurchased physical gifts to wash dirty money from other scams. But the final twist, the one that truly knocked the wind out of me, happened on a rainy Tuesday morning in Miller's office. He slid a document across the metal table. It was the incorporation paper for the shell company that had acted as the corporate sponsor for the matching gift. I looked at the signature on the bottom line. I did not recognize the name of the LLC, but I recognized the signatory, Marcus Thorne. My hands went cold. Marcus Thorne was not just a random name. He was the Senior Vice President of Operations at Stonebridge Benefits Group. He was my boss's boss. He was the man who signed my performance reviews. It suddenly made sickening sense. The reason Dylan had access to such high-level banking protocols, the reason my own company had sent me that threatening whistleblower email before I had even been charged, it was an inside job. Marcus had been using the Stonebridge reputation to legitimize vendors like Bloomnest, taking a cut of the profits in exchange for providing a corporate veil. I was not just a convenient friend to Tessa. I was the perfect fall guy for Marcus. If the scheme imploded, he could point to the rogue compliance officer who had approved the vendor contracts. I sat there, staring at the signature, and realized I had a choice. I could stay quiet about Marcus. If I did, the company would likely settle with me quietly to avoid a scandal. I could keep my pension, my salary, and my safety. But if I handed this paper back to Miller and gave a statement connecting the dots, I would be nuking my own career. No one hires a compliance officer who sends their own VP to federal prison. I went home and found Jordan sitting on the back porch, watching the rain. I told him everything. "Do it," he said without hesitating. "Burn it down." Then he turned to me, his eyes serious. "You know, that day at the shower, when I said we had to go? It wasn't just the test charge. Aspen, I saw the network traffic. I saw a file named Rodriguez_exit_strategy. They had already drafted your resignation letter. Aspen, they were going to frame you for the embezzlement whether you helped them or not. I pulled you out of there because I wasn't going to let you be the collateral damage in their war." I cried then, for the first time in weeks. I cried because I had been trying so hard to be a good employee and a good friend, and both sides had viewed me as nothing more than an asset to be liquidated. The hearing took place 4 months later. The courtroom was cold and sterile. Tessa had taken a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Dylan and Marcus Thorne. She received a sentence of 5 years of probation, mandatory restitution of $200,000, and court-ordered psychological therapy. She sat at the defense table. She looked smaller than I remembered. The baby had been born a month prior, and she looked exhausted, stripped of the glamour and the lighting that she used to command. When I took the stand, she looked up at me. Her eyes were pleading. She wanted me to soften the blow. She wanted me to say that she was just a victim of her husband, that she didn't know what she was doing. But I had taken an oath. I sat in the witness box and I told the truth. I did not use venom. I did not call her names. I simply laid out the timeline. I talked about the text messages where she asked about the batch clearing. I talked about the audio recording where she discussed monetizing our friendship. I talked about the forgery of my signature, Ms. Rodriguez. The defense attorney asked me, "Do you believe Mrs. Cross was under duress?" I looked at Tessa. I looked at the woman who had held my hand through breakups and funerals. I believe she was afraid. I said, my voice steady, "But I also believe that fear and greed can live in the same house." She was afraid of losing her lifestyle, so she decided to sell mine. When the hearing was over, I found myself standing in the hallway outside the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors opened, and Tessa walked out, flanked by her lawyer. She stopped when she saw me. "Aspen," she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. I waited. "I just wanted to say, I hope you are happy," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You told them everything. You didn't have to go that hard. I have a newborn. Aspen, I have nothing left. Could you not have just said you weren't sure? Could you not have helped me one last time?" I looked at her, and I realized that even now, after the handcuffs and the hearings, she still didn't get it. She still thought friendship was a currency she could spend to buy her way out of consequences. I stepped closer to her. I did not feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound, heavy sadness. "Tessa," I said softly, I could have lied for you. I could have burned my life down to keep you warm. But that isn't love. That is just enabling. I can love you from a distance, and I can hope you get better, but I cannot be the background for your picture anymore. I turned and walked away. I walked down the long marble hallway, my heels clicking on the floor, and I did not look back. The aftermath was exactly as hard as I expected. Stonebridge let me go the day after Marcus was indicted. They cited restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. I was the woman who snitched on the C-suite. My phone stopped ringing. Recruiters ghosted me, but I did not stop. I used my severance package to start a small consulting firm dedicated to nonprofit transparency. I work with community organizations now, helping them audit their books and ensure that every dollar actually goes to the people who need it. It is not glamorous. There are no galas, no champagne toasts, no six-figure bonuses. But when I sign my name on a document now, I know exactly what it stands for. Last night, I was cleaning out my cloud storage and I found a photo from the baby shower. It was taken about an hour before Jordan dragged me out. The lighting is perfect. The lavender balloons frame our faces. We are both smiling that wide, blinding smile that says everything is perfect. I looked at that photo, and I deleted it. I do not need perfect smiles anymore. I learned the hard way that there is a difference between wanting to be seen and wanting to be known. Tessa wanted to be seen. She wanted the audience, the applause, the envy. I wanted to be known. And to be known, you have to be real, even if being real means tearing the whole beautiful set down to the studs. Have you ever stayed loyal to someone long after they stopped being loyal to the truth? Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please leave a comment down below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, please subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and show this video some love so it can reach even more people. Stay safe and trust your instincts.